Panel is called Pay the Fucking Filmmakers. And it comes from an article that Sean Farnel, who is sitting up on the stage right now, had put in IndieWire. It's actually been a series of articles about film festivals. And Sean was a programmer at Hot Docs. And is this your first time at Full Frame?
It's my first time at Full Frame.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And to his side is Caroline Libresco, senior programmer at Sundance. She's become a dear friend of mine this year, and we serve together on the Festival Forum Executive Committee, which is an association of film festivals. And lastly, David Wilson. David Wilson, who is the founder and director of the True False Film Festival in Columbia, Missouri, and also a director with a film here on Sunday called We Always Lie to Strangers, and we're so thrilled to have you here. And before we get started, I just wanted to say, you know, a lot about this panel is about the importance of film festivals and what do they give, not just with regards to monetary means, but what does it mean for a film? And the word on the street is that a film we're showing here called 12 O'Clock Boys, the remake rights have been picked up by, I think, Overbrook Entertainment, and that just happened. So that had premiered at South by Southwest, and it's here on the circuit, and, you know, I just heard that on the street. That's not like any sort of official news.
Way to announce it on live streaming.
On this live stream.
So I thought I would just put that out there and then leave it to our panel. So thank you, guys.
Cool. Well, I think this is sort of unmoderated discussion, but I'm going to start us off maybe. Or maybe, I don't know. How
Are you wearing your filmmaker hat or your festival hat?
I'm wearing both, Sean.
Okay.
I got two hats. That's how I roll.
Okay.
You know what? I'm wearing two hats, too. Filmmaker hat.
There you go.
Yeah.
One quick question is, I mean, I feel like I want to ramp the discussion up really fast to kind of, but how many people here have been to more than one festival? Okay, this is exciting. And how many people here have been to one of the festivals that the three of us have worked at? Okay, that's good. And how many people here themselves have made a film before? Okay. So I feel like that just gave us the freedom to take this.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, we're done. We're going to dive in pretty fast to this sort of like what in some ways is a really nuts and bolts, grassroots kind of important discussion for everyone who's involved in independent film to have. And at some points, we'll also probably maybe be a little inside baseball, but we'll try to keep it moving. So, Sean, you wrote this article.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did write an article.
Several. And how many people here have read Sean's article? That's another good question. Okay. Do you want to summarize?
Well, I wrote an article, first of all, I wrote an article in POV magazine in December about festivals and strategies, and raised a few provocative points in that article, one of which was that maybe you just should refuse to pay submission fees at film festivals. And there's a few other things too, some inside baseball, as you say, David. And then I've been writing for IndieWire, and IndieWire was interested in some festival pieces, so I wrote this piece that was called Fair Trade for Filmmakers that proposed the notion that at this time in the sort of development of the international film festival circuit, it might be a time to reconsider the notion, a notion that's been oft considered in the past, to reconsider the notion of directly involving filmmakers in revenue sharing in terms of the funds that are raised at festivals. But it was more than that. The notion was really fair trade. As a filmmaker, what is the trade-off when you have a film in a festival? It's an honor. These events are amazing. I go to many of them. They're great little incubators and intense little bubbles of activity that bring a lot of talented people together, and things happen, including business things. And it's an honor. To be selected. It's difficult to be selected at a film festival. It's very competitive, but it's also a business transaction. And I was hoping to spur filmmakers to think more in those terms as economic actors in this international globalized film festival circuit. And so the article made a number of suggestions. I'm going to write another one next week as a sort of summary to this discussion that makes some more suggestions on the way filmmakers could think about festivals, and festivals could think about more directly engaging filmmakers, not just on the revenue side, but also on the marketing side, and doing a number of things to sort of more deeply engage filmmakers in the business side of their events. That was the basic proposition. It came from my days as a festival programmer. I was programming at Hot Docs, and we were often asked for screening fees. We had a no screening fee policy. Hot Docs was a fairly significant festival. We could get away with it. And yet we did pay screening fees from time to time when I really wanted a film. If it was going to be $500 or €1,000 or whatever, we'd figure out a way and we'd do it. But it was always a select few distributors that were kind of demanding these fees. We paid them. I thought it was unfair because I thought, wow, usually these fees never found their way back to the filmmakers because they weren't in the normal revenue lines. So I thought that wasn't fair. And I thought, if a few distributors are getting this money from us, why can't we figure out a way to spread the money around to independent filmmakers, even if it came in the form of an honorarium, things like that. It's expensive to attend a festival. Many festivals offset a percentage of your costs. Some do a better job than others, including the two festivals represented here today. They both do a great job at hosting filmmakers. But it could be an expensive proposition to have a film on a festival circuit. And I just feel filmmakers shouldn't be footing the bill, especially since revenues are being generated from their work. That's the gist of it.
Has Sundance ever paid a screening fee?
No.
And will not ever?
I just don't think it's relevant to the conversation. I think that, can you ask me a more open-ended question so I can comment?
Yeah, well, so the opening end question I have for you, I wanted to know if in the past Sundance ever had.
No, not that I know of, but I mean, I've only been there for 11 years, so I can't vouch for before 2001.
USA Film Festival, is that?
But there's other kinds of transactions that happen in terms of you having to pay for certain talent, and there's a negotiation involved, usually with especially films that come with a lot of strings attached. There is a negotiation there, I imagine. Actually,
Generally, in the case of our festival, I would say almost 100% that the burden goes back to the distributor when there are expensive talent involved. We put the burden right back on them. But this is a very specific case, and this is kind of my point, which is that every festival plays a different role. Every festival has a different role to play, and therefore is providing very different things. And if we look at Heather's article about what she provides this wonderful meat market, and I think every festival is offering. Some festivals are offering community. Some festivals are offering leveraged relationships in introducing you, the filmmaker, to lots of people. Some are offering nationwide press coverage. And all of those things, each one has to ask itself what it's providing, what its value really is. So I think that's really important in this conversation. And I also think that this idea, by the way, I want to say, I'm so glad you raised this question, because for me, this is my core thing. I think it raises the larger question in the U.S., which is really an issue in the U.S., which is, to what extent can we support artists in the U.S. at large? And what is our responsibility as a democratic nation to artists? I don't think screening fees at film festivals would solve that problem even on a minuscule level. I think we need to address the issue of filmmakers getting paid for their labor. I mean, and I work as a hobby filmmaker because I can't afford to live as a filmmaker. I don't expect any pay. I'm just going to tell you that I'm just finishing up a film that's taken 13 years. Granted, I haven't worked on it full time, but my colleague who's directing and producing has, largely, not for 13 years, but for the last 3 years has worked full time on it. We have not been able to raise a cent for her, let alone for me. I mean, I'm never going to get paid anything. That's, to me, the bigger issue, is sort of what is going on with, especially in documentary, what is going on with our budgets that don't account for payment to filmmakers, certainly not to directors, usually not to producers. What are we doing with these budgets? And it sort of points also to Nick Fraser's point of, like, acquisitions fees have dropped so precipitously in the last 5 years, we can't even talk about. There's like the highest acquisition fee in television in the US right now is, if it's not HBO, that is $100,000. That doesn't cover a quarter. If you're lucky, it doesn't cover a quarter of your, it covers a quarter of your budget as a. So for me, it raises this larger question. And I think in a way, film festivals are there to support filmmakers, and we should be. And that should be our first. Well, we can debate that too. What is the role of film festivals? To create a film culture in the United States. I'm only talking about the United States because I can't speak about Canada, but in the United States, I feel that culture is part of our civilization. It's part of our democracy. We have to have culture. So what can we do to sustain that culture and sustain the artists who contribute to that culture? Absolutely. That should be our mission in the world.
So
but it just seems so complex to me and raises happily this much larger question about how much is there a possibility for sustainability among filmmakers in the U.S.?
Okay, but that's a great question. But let's keep our purview here in this hour to festivals and what festivals can do.
Darn.
We can
Caroline.
buttonhole Molly Thompson later and ask her about fees for acquisition. But
and I wasn't only talking about acquisitions. I was talking
Sure,
about resetting the expectations of budget levels.
absolutely. But proposition. Film festivals have replaced art house cinema as the dominant means of seeing most independent films in the U.S.
Yes.
Tom Power says no. He says TV has, or small screen.
Live events.
I don't think distribution was ever a place for art house cinema. Theatrical distribution. I mean, look, was it ever more than 1% to 2% of the whole theatrical
not of the whole,
box office?
but for those movies.
For those movies. I think I would point to VOD. I
mean, look, so Brothers Keeper.
Yeah.
I don't know how many festivals Brothers Keeper played, but there weren't that many festivals then, so it can't have played that many fests. I'll go with that. They self-released the film. They make money self-releasing. Most documentaries now see their theatrical engagements happen at festivals, and they don't get paid.
But no one makes any money from theatrical engagement.
Brothers
Okay.
Keeper did.
What?
Brothers Keeper did.
But that was a very different time. Detropia might have this time. I mean, I wish we had some numbers. If you really want to talk about this, I don't have them prepared. I don't think theatrical is a moneymaker. It is so expensive to release. It's a marketing tool for the rest of your release.
I don't think a festival, even the most fulsome of festival runs, is a panacea for the revenue life of a film. It's one little piece of the puzzle, but the reality is that it represents the most significant opportunity for a live event theatrical run. I mean, where it gets complicated is what do you do? I mean, a theatrical run now is essentially all about building the marketing campaign for VOD. So
it costs money.
It costs money, yeah.
Money.
So if that's going to be a sort of loss leader on your ultimate revenue goals, which are going to be from VOD, then how do you use your festival run to build that campaign? What can festivals do to support that campaign? How long should your festival life be? Is it maybe give yourself a 3-month window? How should festivals be approaching their premiere policies in those instances? Should festivals be opening up their listservs to serve
I love that idea. That's come up in all the commentary.
There's a number of things that have to be considered, but there's no way I would suggest that sharing revenues even at festivals is a panacea to the ills of independent filmmaking financially. My suggestion was that it's a piece of a puzzle, and in the next piece I'm going to write, I'm going to add on to that puzzle. But I mean, a simple thing I thought of last week is, because I was dealing with some filmmakers and festivals, they're waiting around for a no, probably, these filmmakers. Most festivals invite as they go in the process. You invite along the process. Yet they tell everybody no at the end. 90%, 95% of the people are going to be declined from most of these festivals, but you don't find out to the end. But those no decisions have been made throughout that process too. Why can't filmmakers be notified when there's a definitive no on their film so they can move on and plan a strategy more? And yet they have to wait months in some cases for a no.
I mean, you want to?
I know what the problem is because I was on the other end.
Is that the problem is? It creates.
It's so much nicer to think that your film lasted all that way.
But it would create a frenzy among the filmmaking community if decisions were given before the end.
But it's a change in culture. I mean, things in the culture have to change, and that's a major snag for a filmmaker to wait 3 months to find out they didn't get into Sundance. to have to regroup, to have missed a lot of other deadlines while they're waiting, and you lost maybe 3 to 6 months in the life cycle of your film there.
It's a
But-
really good point.
But here's now, I don't know if Sundance would do this, but for example, I mean, any filmmaker who's applying to True False, we will generally wait until the end to say no. And there's a lot of factors there, and it is sometimes because a film is actually still in consideration and we're curating a program. But for any film that reaches out to us in that, in the 6 to 10 weeks before the fest, 6 to 8 weeks at least, and says, I need an answer now, I'll give them an answer.
We do that too.
Yeah,
whenever people need to know.
There's always exceptions. We've all done that.
But it feels like a public announcement would be really
No,
hard on the process for a lot of people.
On a weekly basis, mail out declination letters to the people that you're a solid no on. There's always going to be a floating list under consideration, but at the end of the week,
It's a good idea.
we
I'm gonna
know
take
these 50
notes.
films have been declined. Let's let them know and let them off the hook so they can plan. That's
Yeah.
all.
So
Yeah.
going back to the article as the inciting incident here, do you want to stand behind your 35%?
The 35% was a provocation that worked quite effectively,
Yeah.
by the way, and
It
it's
was a good one.
not a random number. It's usually the gross that an exhibitor gives back to the distributor or the independent after a theatrical run. It's 35%. That's the art house rate. It worked as a provocation because it puts a value. 35% of the earned revenues, which is box office, from my screenings. What's the value? There's the value. If I can't get the 35%, what else can I get? Can you include announcements of my VOD release on your listserv? Other marketing opportunities.
And that's, I think that's an important thing to say, those other things, because that is, the counter argument there is what festivals do that distributors also do is marketing.
Right.
And when 1,000 people show up to see a screening at True False, I'm kind of the reason those 1,000 people are there.
Mhm.
Like, they've never heard of that film before, and the only thing they know about that film is I wrote a description of it. Now, I can't do what I do without that film, and I think it's on me as a festival director to do everything I can to support filmmakers. My answer to the question would be, we exist to support filmmakers. That's our number one goal.
But when 1,000 people come out to see the film in Columbia, does it have any possibility for the theatrical in that city? It's a small market.
It does. So two hard examples. One, Buck, and one, Searching for Sugar Man. Buck played opening night of our festival, and then at a very, very large venue. We brought it back for a theatrical run, and it remains, I think, the highest grossing doc ever at our theater. I also help start and occasionally still help out with a theater called the Ragtag Cinema in Columbia, Missouri. Searching for Sugar Man played closing night, came back and did very well, but not quite as well. And I think maybe we showed it to a few more people, so we may have cut into our own audience later. But both still had exceptional runs at the theater, even in a town of 100,000 people.
Because that's another consideration if you're a filmmaker, producer, distributor with a film and a festival. How many screenings, how many seats? Is this an urban market where we want to come back to later and play? Obviously, Park City's not a factor. I mean, in terms of being a theatrical market. But Toronto, for instance, New York, San Francisco, etc., where there's all these cities have large public festivals. Some of these festivals are screening 3, 4, 5 times in large houses. That's a theatrical run.
I just don't agree with that. I think that festivals have a different quality, and the audiences are sophisticated enough to understand that. And they won't. Most audience. It would be really interesting to do for our new. We're creating this festival organization, which hopefully will be able to assess some of these things and figure out how to leverage more support for artists. Absolutely. But I do think what I've seen just in now it's terrifyingly 20 years working in film festivals, small and large, is that actually screenings help word of mouth and do support release in an over-tapped audience that is barraged with marketing.
I don't know. I know in the city of Toronto that only applies to a very small percentage of the films that come through the festivals. Toronto has like 70 film festivals, for instance. That is the art house repertory life in the city.
Okay.
If you did the numbers, that probably the festivals combined probably do better numbers than, say, the Lightbox and some of the other smaller art house cinemas. but none of those revenues are cycled back to the distribution and filmmaking chain.
I just think we're conjecturing here. You know what I mean? Like in LA, I think it's a whole different thing, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah,
'cause
for
the
sure. Every
audience is
city's
really
different.
different, you know? And in New York, it's probably a much readier audience that's more exposed to more work. I just think this kind of, actually that question, when I worked at a little festival, you know, where they would say, no, you can only play it once, you can't play it twice, because we don't want to, the distributor would say, we don't want to, you know, max out our market. And we'd say, but you don't understand, this will be great word of mouth for you from a niche audience that loves this film and will tell 5 of their friends. So don't you want that? You know, and they would disagree. But it was still conjecture, and I really see a lot of room for study of this. Is there any way for us to all understand more scientifically and look at more case statements?
Yeah, absolutely.
Case studies.
I mean, there's a flip side to this, which is so this year we showed Cutie and the Boxer at True False. We showed it to about 3,500 people, I think, in the weekend, and the distributor who was there, who I think was gulped a little bit at how many people were watching it, but ultimately said, if this was my opening weekend and I could actually count these, even if we weren't paying back 35%, if you could actually count those grosses, we would have been the biggest weekend in the country for that film. That's the biggest weekend in the country. I guarantee that's the biggest weekend in the country. Single theater run in the country for that film at any point in its life. Yeah. So there's maybe a way, as films.
I know a distributor in Canada that actually does that, in the market there.
Yeah,
tied very closely.
Bring up the numbers.
When a festival screening precedes the theatrical by a week or so, they'll just roll the festival numbers in, to bump up because then they get more bookings, right?
Right.
That's a great idea. I mean, I also go back though to Tom Hall's article about where would the money come from, and I think it's this is real. It's real. Like, we have to just confront that film festivals struggle, and we can debate the value of every film festival for sure, but it's 100% true that no festivals it's never really a business transaction. It's not earned revenues. I'll tell you, our earned revenue on tickets is just over half of the budget of the festival. So we have to raise the rest of it. There's no profit. There really isn't any profit being made. So that's real. We're raising money in order to create a platform for the work. It's P&A, it's PR, it's marketing. And I actually loved Tom's language about marketing partners, and I think that it feels like it's really a pathway we can continue to go down to explore further. How can we be better marketing partners? And we've been trying to do this with our very tiny but effective artist services platform at Sundance, where we're creating deals for filmmakers so they can take, when they don't get an all-over deal with a distributor, they can work with us to kind of help them make better deals with parsing out their distribution. So that kind of thing, I mean, that's just one way of doing it, but there are obviously many, many opportunities out there for festivals. Again, I'm talking about leveraging relationships on behalf of filmmakers.
But the flip side, just to make the counter-argument, is that
right ahead.
Even though only half the revenue is from ticket sales, HP and Acura and whoever aren't at Sundance if those films aren't there. So the big money that's coming in from
Moonshine
sponsors,
Company,
or the Moonshine Company. Thank you very much, Moonshine Company. Pay the bills. So
Absolutely.
that money doesn't exist
happy.
to fund the rest of the festival and the infrastructure without those films. Right. So it's not entirely fair to just put the ticket sale,
There's
that there aren't profits. Like this notion that there's profit.
But there is revenue. I mean, the festival has what, a $10 million-ish budget?
$12 million.
$12 million budget for there's a fairly decent business. I mean, in terms of
just under half of that is charitable dollars.
Yeah,
so I'm not sure.
What about honorariums? Just an honorarium for the filmmakers.
I mean,
$500.
I think it would be great for festivals to share what a typical festival looks like and how much you spend on each aspect. And I know that I think it's about rejiggering priorities in a very real fundraising environment. You're talking about rejiggering priorities because it's hard to costs go up, and you're trying to have fundraising meet the increase in costs that happen every year. So fundraising has to meet that. It's more individual donations, more grants, more corporate sponsorships, and more government grants or government support. So you have to keep growing that every year to meet rising costs. So it's about rejiggering priorities. Okay, so what do you get rid of?
And let me
Well,
just say, I mean, not to suck
truly.
up, not
What
to
do you
suck
get rid
up, because it's hard, because Sundance does more for independent filmmakers than
I'm
any.
not even defending that. I'm
no,
just,
no, no,
I'm
but
just saying,
it's
like,
just a
for
fact. I mean,
everybody, what do we
it's-
get rid of?
It's clear where the money, the labs, the community you create around the culture of independent filmmaking and independent creators in general, because it's just not filmmakers anymore in the family there. It's it's the benchmark to which, not every festival can be that, but internationally, there's not an organization that does it better. So and you're not taking dollars out of a theatrical market in Park City or Salt Lake City. So it's not the typical case, nor is true false, because you pay you invite all the filmmakers, you pay all their expenses. The hospitality is extraordinary.
But it's not
But-
that. I agree with
Caroline-
you. If there were money to give, we'd have to take it out of a line item somewhere else. So we should study our budgets.
So the gauntlet I have to throw down, though, the tricky thing about these things is that it's not our fest. We are supporting filmmakers.
Mhm.
That's clear. There's a lot of fests out there, and it's not full frame. But there's a lot of other fests out there.
Who is it? No, just kidding.
We started as a tiny fest. We started as a fest with a $60,000 a year budget. Now we're a little more than 10 times bigger than that. From the beginning, we paid all filmmaker flight and lodging. Every small festival in the country, I can look at the camera and say this, every small festival in the country can do at least that. If you can't do that, I'm not sure why you're a festival.
Yep.
That's my...
Oh, I get some applause.
Um,
And in fact, as I understand True False, you basically not that you don't invite the film, but it's a priority for you to get the filmmaker there. That's part of the experience.
we tend to not bring films if we can't have the filmmaker.
'Cause I know some
That's-
festivals are crossing their fingers and hope that half the filmmakers
Right.
can't come.
There's a whole other discussion about why I think it was a smart marketing decision on our part to bring filmmakers and how we make filmmakers part of our marketing plan. It's self-serving, it helps us as a festival, but I think it also...
You're really a filmmaker-driven festival.
Right.
And that's what you do.
Right. So
You've
when I
defined
say
that.
I'm not sure what else you're doing, that's actually an open-ended question. A festival could come back and say, we don't pay for these things because we're offering blank. And maybe that blank is so awesome that it counteracts that. But I do think that if a festival isn't bringing a filmmaker in and isn't paying for the film, I'm not sure what filmmakers are getting from that experience. I know what the festival is getting. And I know what the community of where the festival lives is getting. And I think those things are sometimes not so pure. And so I would like to see priorities adjusted for many festivals out there.
Well, no, I think I'm in support. I think I think it's crucial to look at film festival budgets and really understand where the priorities sit, because budgets reflect priorities, budgets reflect values. And the question is quite concrete. It's like, if a small festival has certain things allocated and they can only raise a certain amount of money, they would need to find a way to reduce costs in another area in order to pay fees. It's just quite simple. So the question is, from where would they take that money? That's all I'm asking. I'm just saying it's very concrete. It's not like they've got extra money. That's my point.
And when in conceiving the piece, which was was something I've been thinking about for years, from the festival into things, how can we kick back some more? How can we support filmmakers better tangibly? The piece was meant to sort of provoke discussion, but also mostly to have filmmakers ask the right questions in terms of planning their festival strategies, asking the right questions of festivals once they're invited before they accept, not after, because then you're kind of handcuffed. And that's what's really, but it's not a black and white issue. There's so much diversity amongst festivals, so many different types of experience and reasons you should go. But I just didn't see filmmakers understanding the process that well, and I didn't see them feeling very empowered by the opportunities and that presented themselves, and really understanding how they could truly leverage even just a couple of festival screenings, never mind a festival run. It just wasn't happening.
I wonder, and I love that there's so many great ideas in the comment sections on all the all the articles. And sorry,
I was going to say that's all consolidated. I did a Storify. I did the Storify thing, which I think you can, is on my blog too. So you can, all the articles have been consolidated on that one Storify thing, which you can find on my blog.
I love the
Ripping
idea of
Reality.
there being like a rating system run by filmmakers of festivals,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that people, it's all out there of sort
A
of
Yelp
what categories that, exactly, that festivals provide, what they do for filmmakers, and it should be. I hope it's both qualitative and quantitative things.
Yeah.
That people can start to see and make, and then start to organize around it. And the lesbian, gay, transgender festivals have always paid. The Jewish film festivals have always paid.
Yep.
Interesting. Why?
And they figured out a way to work that into their economic model.
Absolutely.
And
They did.
And
They absolutely
they
did.
flourish.
Totally. So we have to look at their budgets also and see how they do it. They do it because they have to do it, by the way.
Yeah,
They were not getting films.
And I think as a wearing my filmmaker hat, the hardest thing and the best thing about your article, Sean, is that sense of empowerment. Is that because it's so scary as a filmmaker, even like you've applied to this festival, you're sort of waiting for approval, and then you get it, and then you're too scared to like you're afraid that they're going to turn around and say no. Like you really are. It's like, if I ask for something, what if they uninvite me? And so like as sort of crazy as that seems, like I felt that, like having been around festivals for 10 years, I get a festival invite and I'm like, ooh, can I ask for this? Like, I don't know. Like,
I mean, this is I have to say I agree with you that I think every festival should pay for flight and lodging for filmmakers. I think they should be in other words, it's a symbol of welcoming them into the place that depends on their genius, for its significance. At the same time, I mean, something that comes up all the time is, directors get that around the world. Producers who sometimes originate projects are there before the director gets there, and they're long after the director leaves and goes on to another project.
Yeah.
Never get paid for anything. They never get flown in. They sometimes don't even get tickets. I mean, that's a long fight too, and one that's opening yet another Pandora's box, but one that we should also be having this conversation, I think.
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, but that's a producer. I mean, the producer and director have to work that out amongst
I disagree
themselves.
completely. I think that it's also on the film industry and on the independent film industry to understand the role of the creative producer.
Right, it's true.
The other question like that is, let's say if a festival or festivals start paying, are they paying executive producer? Are they paying director? Are they paying distributor?
That's why I said honorarium, because if it was a fee, it would go to the distributor, and chances are it would go into a line that wasn't the main revenue line that
Should
they
be a
have to pay back.
filmmaking team honorarium.
I would say an honorarium. That as a start. I mean, you're not
Right.
going to get up, and then the goal for me is 35%. I would say, but I know. I mean, at the festival I previously worked at, that was my goal, was to have an honorarium at the start, and to use that as
in
a
addition
springboard.
to lodging and
Yeah.
flights,
I mean, hot dogs paid flights and lodging.
Yeah.
But the honorarium was the next step, because it's expensive. There's cabs. I mean, if you're in a bigger city, it probably costs, even with your expenses, $2,000 or $3,000 to be in the festival, even with a certain percentage of your expenses covered. So,
Yeah, I think for me the goal would be to make attending a festival zero sum for filmmakers. Sort of like as an initial first thing, like. And because we know, like, even if we're doing flight and lodging and we provide food vouchers for restaurants, still some part of they're still spending money, and they're still gonna cost them. So.
And they still need to, at many festivals, hire a publicist and hire and bring in subjects and bring in other folks. So it's expensive.
it would be great to hear if y'all had any questions or comments or suggestions. Not sure if there's mics in the audience, but if not, just stand up. There's a mic
You
up
can
here.
have my mic.
We can also repeat. I'm so ready to repeat questions.
Does anyone want to jump in with a comment or a question here, or just want us to keep babbling on about? Okay, go in the back.
I think it's an interesting debate you're having. I think that if you introduce the notion of paying filmmakers to come in, I think you are also opening the Pandora's box of who do you pay what? What do you pay the Pennybaker as opposed to
Right.
non-filmmaker? So it has to be obviously standardized if you're going to go there. But I also think that with respect to giving box office bonuses or paying for the film, if the filmmaker is coming because there's revenue being generated, that's also a dicey road to go down.
Right.
I think that it's oftentimes, and most oftentimes, the only time that these films are going to ever be screened theatrically
Right.
for a large audience, which is a total gift to most filmmakers. And that's the trade-off, in my opinion. And if you're going to even discuss that formula, I think it would be a percentage of ticket sales, right? Even though I believe it would.
I would say I think it has to be equalized across the board if it exists, and I think that it cannot be based on a percentage. Because I don't like the idea of pitting filmmakers against each other in terms of what theater they're in. I mean, it's already tricky enough to figure out which theaters play which films. And there's films that really should be, in a 150 seat theater because that's where they're going to shine. And adding money into the equation where that film is now looking at the film in the 1,000 seat theater and going, well, that could have been me.
Yeah, the one thing, I mean, when I was conceiving this, and people brought it out, I mean, the article was only like 800 words. I couldn't cover every problem, but I understood the problem of turning market economics onto the festivals and then becoming compete scenarios. My idea is that it goes into a pot and it's shared equally, so that it doesn't affect curatorial integrity. You're not trying to I was going to say you're not trying to just program films that are generating box office, but in reality, festivals, that's part of the curatorial equation. At Hot Docs, we had some big houses to fill, and at times we needed a certain kind of film to fill those houses, and that was a different curatorial operation that was happening there when I was looking for those kinds of films. So in effect, box office is part of the programming.
It also is good for the smaller films. It's really important that people understand that it's good for there to be a range of films in a festival, so that audiences will flock to the bigger films that they've maybe heard about, that have more marketing behind them or launching in some way. So that to bring a spotlight to tinier films.
Yeah, no, of course.
I mean, Sean, I happen to think that from again, looking into the future, but thinking from a purely budgetary standpoint, that I think 10% is a much more, even as a far off number, it's a more realistic number. I mean, it's maybe a number that, I don't think that, again, like that 35% is based on a standard number for theatrical distribution. And
reach for the stars, David, and maybe you'll make the moon. That's what
I think I'm more comfortable with this conversation staying in the realm of how can we support filmmakers? Right. How can we make it a zero sum where they're not expending to come to a festival?
To me, that's the first goal.
I feel like that's where I'm comfortable, because I feel like when we get into percentages and market forces, we're getting into tricky territory that people will resist on many different levels.
Sure.
So how many feature films at Sundance?
120.
So it would be $60,000 would get every feature filmmaker a $500 stipend on top of...
Man, you're good at the math. That was quick.
I
was going
on top of their travel and lodging.
Yeah.
It's not bad. 60 grand.
But that's like one full-time programmer, right?
Really?
I mean, those are the trade-offs, right? That's what you're saying. The trade-offs are...
It would, honestly, look at our marketing and PR budgets, because that's where, and our ticketing systems, and it would come, it's from that more,
right.
I think.
Right, so that's only like 6 New York Times ads, right? I mean...
I don't know, I'd have to go back and look. I mean, it's something we would have to raise money for.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Speaking for backlayers, we spent a few $1,000s covering the state of North Carolina, making a documentary, submitted full frame, didn't need to require requirement. My daughter also spent a few $100s submitting to various countries.
Submission fees. Also a revenue generator for festivals, right? It's expensive for filmmakers to submit to festivals. You said $300 in your case. So the gift of having a live audience is remuneration enough for in your case.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, sorry. So the
The airline ticket and free hotel and rate.
right.
The important thing is exposure. And that's what Durham is supporting the arts.
So the point, which I think is well made, I'll do my best to repeat for the cameras, is just that the number I threw out, which is the $500 number, is actually nothing, compared to budgets of most films and what a filmmaker puts in. It's the exposure the filmmaker is often after, and getting some of those expenses covered, like the airline and the hotel covered, and the chance for an audience to see their work is what the filmmaker really craves.
If you did that, let's say $500, that would make it a gambling operation for filmmakers instead of creative arts operation.
Yeah, I got all fancy in the IndieWire piece and was quoting from Lewis Hyde's book, The Gift, in which, the point is that artists work within a gift economy, and they're in a sense gifting their work to the community they're making it for, and that's all great, and yet they're laboring in a market economy. And how do those two things correlate and coexist? And I think that it's an intangible. The opportunity to share your work with a live audience at a festival is an amazing experience, and as your daughter is finding out, it's also very, very tough to crack that nut for 95% of the films that are submitted to festivals. But I'm not taking by suggesting that there's some revenue equation here. I would not take away the fact that festivals are super important. In fact, at the core of independent film culture, and really important. It's just that they're at a evolutionary stage. There's so many festivals. It's a fulsome a business, a complex business that is not for profit, but yet is in the center of a lot of revenue streams, and that it's time to start thinking of where the filmmaker fits into that. Among the many things, of course, is the gift of sharing your work.
And your comment makes me think also about another thing that we're working on in also Jodi Arlington's involved with this, and you guys will be too. You are, and you will. We're going to recruit you. But basically, we're trying to, for the first time, create something like a festival, like a bar association for festivals to create standards and practices for film festivals. Doesn't exist in the United States with all these hundreds, maybe thousands of film festivals. So we're going to be working on this idea of accreditation, of what does it take to be a festival of value. And I think that's going to be a really important process as well for everyone, and it will hopefully help filmmakers.
FIAF
has A, B, and C
used to
fests
do
in
that,
Europe.
and there used to be rules. For instance, and if
We're not going to have that.
If you're a FIAF festival, you weren't allowed to screen the film more than twice, which is why TIFF originally had 2 public screenings and an industry screening, for instance. But they seem to have lost their kind of teeth, their sort of policing teeth.
But obviously we need for filmmakers to be a part of that process of defining what are best practices.
Yeah, and one of the interesting sort of discussion threads that's come out of this, and in fact became tangible a couple of weeks ago at South by Southwest, is the notion of, and Brian Newman mentioned it in his piece, is this notion of like filmmaker cooperatives, as you're doing with festivals, filmmakers also getting together and sharing best practices and information, and maybe group negotiating, et cetera, et cetera. So that is an interesting development for me. I see some percolation of a movement happening there.
And there's also a burgeoning producers organization that's happening with with many major American producers, and I think actually this should be in their bailiwick as well. So
yeah, and by no means, I certainly, it was, I used some strong language in the article.
Love it.
But it was not meant. I come from the festival side. I grew up at festivals. That I love them, and it wasn't by no means meant to be adversarial. I just thought that filmmakers needed some spark and a little kick in the butt for them to be asking the right questions, because I just felt they weren't. So we have, go ahead, Julia, I think. Hey. Submission fees.
That's kind of one of my pet peeves, working with a lot of young filmmakers, first-timers coming into the room, you're shaking your head. Why do they have to be so high?
Submission fees. What's the fee at Sundance?
Why can't people raise the money so that their fee can be $10 or something that would cover some basic expenses? Some of these fees are $40, $50, $60, and they're short.
Yeah.
And people, particularly younger and first-timers,
I-
That is a different story. Why does that happen?
I'll take a stab because I ran the submissions department at TIFF. They have to be, there's submission fees because it's an expensive process to administer. You have to hire people to run databases. You have to hire pre-screeners, never mind pay your programmers. If you're going to have an unsolicited submission offering, you have to fund that process. That's why there's submission fees. Yet I still tell filmmakers to refuse to pay them because in reality they're unevenly applied. Most filmmakers that we know, we'd waive the fees for them, and it was a very, I thought, unfair practice in terms of like evenly and justly applying those fees, and it usually I thought was a tax on the poor. You're making the filmmaker with the least chance of getting into the festival pay the fee.
That's it in a nutshell. That's the hardest thing about it. I mean, we look at it as we do every year. We looked at it this year, and we could have programmed our entire festival without any submissions. Maybe a couple of shorts. There were submissions of people we knew, and they submitted, and that's fine. And a lot of them pay. We have a pretty set structure for that. So, as a festival that doesn't show that many films,
How many do you show?
we show 37 features and 25 shorts, I think.
And a lot of that is through stuff you saw at festivals, stuff you hear
Right.
about through your established
So
networks.
I could get rid of my entire submissions thing, except I don't want to miss that one film.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to miss that film. I don't want that young filmmaker who makes that great film and doesn't have any connections and doesn't know anyone in the industry to not have some way of getting it to us. So we build an entire system, and even for a small festival, we got just around 1,000 submissions this year. We have an entire system of screeners and a rating system and database and second watches. And I think we do a really good job with it. And it's still, I'm looking for one film. And it's crazy. And I don't.
You guys can't get your sponsors to help pay for that, or to help pay to. Can't you go to some of your wealthy sponsors? I know there are plenty of them, most festivals, right? And say, well, let's pay this filmmaker $250 to come, $500. Can't you sell that as part of what you do? Like, why is that such an odd question?
Yes.
To get sponsored, to have sort of a filmmaker remuneration plan as part of a sponsorship package.
With 10 minutes left, Julia, I'm going to say that True False is committing for 2014 to offer an honorarium to all our
Yes,
filmmakers.
An announcement.
Other festival directors can now pelt me with rotten fruit. It'll be small. I don't know how small yet. We're going to seek that money from sponsors and from donors. We're not going to try to take it out of existing budget. We already run on a very small budget. But as it's going to be part of our effort to hit that zero sum. We think we do a lot. This whole discussion, we think we do a lot for filmmakers in terms of what we offer them. But we want to try to make it not cost money. And actually, I think it's a great idea to see if we could raise money to offset submission fees. Now, Sundance gets at least 5 times as many, if not 10 times as many submissions as us, I think. Like 10,000 or something?
11,000.
Would you like
Yeah.
would you like to make an announcement this afternoon, Caroline? No. Get Cooper on the phone.
Let me get my phone.
Let's make something happen here.
So yeah.
Part of the problem for you with no submission fees would just be already making a manageable number of submissions that much more hellacious, wouldn't it? It's a little bit of a partly to help fund the process, but also partly to have some sort of barrier to entry because there's already too much coming your way.
What we've seen, the explosion of filmmaking in the last 10 years is mind-boggling. Our numbers have more than doubled. And it costs money. We take it very seriously.
Yeah,
We're looking for more than one new film because we have a triple the size. We're looking for whatever we can find that's new. We get, it's our job to not miss stuff. We are not perfect, but that's our job. So it costs money. It takes staff. It's a huge undertaking to process 11,000 entries. It's a lot of people to work on that and watch them and second watch them, and it just costs money. It's real, real costs. But I hear you. I really hear you, and I'm taking notes, and I'm bringing all this back.
But Julie, you don't pay fees probably. Do you ever pay fees for your work? You do. Some. Right.
But my younger ones who have very good films go to 2 or 3, they spend a couple $100. By the way, one of the neat things about what you're doing, David, is it means a lot to a young person to get paid for their work.
Right.
They can tell their mom and dad,
It's a great
Yeah,
point.
no,
I
it's
mean,
true. Like, look, yeah, if Alex Gibney brings his new film to True False, and we'll pay him the same honorarium we'll pay anyone else, and it won't matter that much to Alex,
I'm making as much
But-
as Alex Gibney.
but they'll be a filmmaker, right? So that'll work out. Sorry, you have a question right there. You've been patient.
Well, we've talked a lot about what festivals can do, and also just in response to I want to make sure that if the young filmmakers here, and I consider myself one of them, also make sure that they keep the onus on themselves to be aware of these fees when they start their project.
Build it into your budget. Build fees or marketing into a marketing expense line.
Someone called it pre-distribution. That was their thing.
Film and say, now I have no more money. You know, you need to be considering, and I love these festivals, but the gatekeepers, are somewhat changing. I mean, a festival run may not be your best bet. We had a film, Typeface, which we got rejected from every festival.
Came after the Helvetica film, probably. Well, that's a bummer.
And we gave up on festivals and we put that money into building community and
Right.
other outreach efforts. And soon enough, we had festivals coming to us to ask us to show. So there's other ways you can do this. You
Soup.
have to be mindful at the beginning.
But also, I mean, everything costs money with film. So here's the thing. This is a very indulgent craft, and it's expensive. And it's really important to face that and confront it. It costs money to do outreach. You have to raise money to do outreach, to do audience engagement. That's on you, the filmmakers. You have to raise that. So it's like, this stuff costs money. It's like, I feel like we live in this bizarre mythologized bubble as a filmmaking community, and we think in our utopian vision, filmmakers would be able to make how many thousands of filmmakers would all be able to make a living making films, and every festival would be able to provide everything. And meanwhile, schools are underfunded, and what percentage of Americans don't have health care? Like, we have to, it's like, it just points me back to I get back to larger questions a lot. Do we need all these films? Do we need all these films? I'm asking, that's a really radical question.
Yeah, I
to
know.
ask.
I know. There's too many films.
No, the answer
I know. I'm asking
too
a
many
really,
films-
this is a provocative question I'm telling the camera. I know it's an unpopular and provocative thing to say. Do we need all these films? I'm asking. I'm
always say,
genuinely asking.
But it's easy to answer big. No, of course not. But,
but
it's impossible to answer small.
I know.
But I mean, there's always this thing. There's too many films. You hear a lot from distributors and exhibitors. There's too many films. Festival programmers. Nobody ever says there's too many books or
Yeah,
there's too
good
many.
point.
And who's the
I
gatekeepers?
bet publishers do.
Yeah,
But
maybe
people have to
publishers
read
do.
manuscripts
Yeah,
of
I think
publishers.
But
that's
I mean,
true. I think
who gets to decide which films get made and which films don't?
I
mean,
know. So if you want to live in a democracy, you have to deal with all this film. But
Yeah.
then, does every artist, should every person making a film be able to make their living at it? I am asking that question.
Oh, that's
But
no.
the-
I mean, it's not an
Why
entitled.
not?
it's not-
Why
it's
not, though?
The
it's not an
parallel question
entitlement.
from this panel is, do we need all these film festivals? And I would say the
Good
answer is
question.
no.
Good question.
Well, or if yes, they have to change. The economic model has to change.
But I also think filmmakers need to organize on this. If it's important to filmmakers, then we have to organize.
Yeah, that's good. Go ahead.
It's called
great.
labor unions. Hello.
Well, I think the point that was made that wasn't on mic earlier, I know we have to wrap up. I'll be very... Oh, sorry, repeat the question. The question was... I was going to be so good about that. The question was advice for new filmmakers, for young filmmakers, especially given like what I said about how few we actually take from our submissions pool. There was a comment made earlier off mic about potentially finding other avenues besides festivals. But I think also if you do want to go to festivals, there's a lot of strategy you can use to make a film that will play well at festivals. If you're making fiction films and want to play internationally, don't have a lot of dialogue in your film. If you're making short films, 8 to 15 minutes is a programmable length for short films. I mean, there's a whole panel's worth of advice about this if you want your film to show at festivals.
But remember, too, that it is truly our job, as we're all programmers, to discover work. And we take that, as you heard, very seriously. That is our job. So you have a little faith in that, because it's real.
On the right, on my right.
Yeah, if you look at our
Repeat the question.
Question is about at Sundance, where there's a market and there's the bigger distributors like Weinstein Company. Do you have a way to get money from them, to support the festival?
Yeah, they all pay very, very high fees for screening, just for getting into films, and then they also are solicited as what we call industry associates. So they're all asked to come in at a certain level for industry companies.
But it's a good question, because I know in the documentary, even in the market context, documentary festivals, most of the buyers attending are paid to come, or they're in some way. They're certainly not paying for their passes. A lot of times their hotels are covered to some extent. In some cases, there's flight bursaries, etc. In that sense, the documentary markets are bringing in the buyers in order to sort of create a market context at their events.
But
So
you
they're
as the
not
filmmaker want them here. It's
Yeah.
really great for you
Yeah.
if they're here.
Not necessarily
And they
a bad
might
thing.
not come if their way wasn't paid, because they too, like programmers, are tracking work and they know what they want to buy already. So to get them into the mode where they are going to discover takes an investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, my question had to do with something you brought up earlier, which is kind of this in the context of the larger issues of funding for the arts, which I do think is very relevant to this conversation, because the one kind of player that's not represented on this panel is the funder. And no funding comes without strings attached. A sponsor wants something, if you're getting a grant, they want something. I think, speaking about niche festivals, part of the reason they can pay strings is that, they're in a particular niche, and the funders they have supporting them are supporting, the raising of awareness about that particular niche, which, that gets back to, we're trying to show films that cover a wide variety of topics. So I guess my question is, and I applaud you for planning to raise the money to offer an honorarium, but, I'll be very curious, and I hope you will report back to us about how, what sorts of funders are you looking at to essentially support them?
Yeah, I guess the question in the end, and we really have to wrap up, was about who we will find to support our honoraria, and I'm not exactly sure yet. We have some ideas, and I'll certainly share those as best we can. I want to wrap up. I want to thank Sean for provoking us all, Caroline for answering and having great thoughts about festivals. Thanks to Deirdre and Full Frame for allowing this conversation to take place, and thanks to you all. Have a great afternoon. Hopefully carry this conversation out into the weekend.
Tweet that thing about True False playing honorariums. Let's get the news out there, folks.